Doc Holliday.
Hello, everyone. We are so excited to have a wonderful guest on the show tonight. And let me say hello first to our wonderful Bishop Joshua, Dr. Joshua Sparks. Hello, Bishop Dr. Joshua Sparks.
Hey, everybody. Good to be on here tonight on the Web Radio Network, broadcasting all across this nation and around the world in all 24 time zones. And what a wonderful program we have tonight. We have Charles Romans with us tonight, a man of great talent, a man of great worth, and a man that I'm proud to call my brother and my friend. Welcome, Brother Charlie.
Well, thank you for asking me to be on, and I appreciate that glowing introduction. I hope to live up to that in at least a small way.
Well, that was just like the soft introduction. I've got a big introduction. So let's
Oh,
just go ahead and get started with that. So
Yeah.
that
And,
way
oh,
we can really give you something to live up to.
and
Brother,
I've been
okay.
hearing about you for quite a while. He talks a lot about you. And so it's really great to finally get to actually meet you today.
Well, thank you, and he's talked a lot about you too. He seems
Oh,
to be the connecting glue that brings everything together.
yeah.
And
just
I'm
call me
really
Elmer.
well. You go.
No, don't.
Yeah, that's
Well, you can if
funny.
you want to, but
Because you know I will, so don't
I
give
know
me
you
any
will. I know.
ammunition.
But ladies and gentlemen, Charles Romans is the host of the paranormal podcast Shadows of Legend, currently in its third season. Um, he's a multi award winning journalist. Um, of course, you hear he's got a perfect voice. He's we was talking about that as we come on the air that he needs to do some voice work, and he's had some amateur experience in the past of
Right.
doing that and helping to put people to sleep. Now, don't you all go to sleep tonight. We want you to stay awake while he's talking. I know he does have the perfect voice, but he's a lifelong student of the strange and paranormal, so he fits in perfectly here, and a paranormal cryptid public speaker. He's published several books in fiction and nonfiction, and he's currently working on a book about the beliefs and interpretations of spiritual activity. So, without further ado, welcome Charles Romans to Explaining the Unexplainable.
Well, thank you for having me here, and that is a bit to live up to, actually. So, uh, I guess I should start. I'm not a spring chicken here. I've been on the planet for a few years, and I grew up in Appalachia. Okay, now the Appalachian Mountains they're arguably the oldest mountain range on the planet. And when something's that old, it dreams deeply of things that haven't been on Earth for millennia. And sometimes those dreams, they come back and they take form when they walk under the trees. Uh, I grew up hearing all of these stories and devouring this stuff voraciously because it was fascinating to me from several different standpoints. Because everyone has a belief system, and you can tell a lot about a society by what honestly makes them afraid. A lot of people, like ghost hunters, for instance, they will go in looking for scary things, but they still get scared. What is the fascination with fear? And what does each culture consider to be terrifying? So I've studied these things for years. I've done research myself. I've interviewed uh, many people from all over the world, and some things are different, but there's a common thread that runs through these things. Uh, I think we all, and Josh, you and I have discussed it before. I think that the human animal yearns for the spiritual. It's not necessarily just religion. We want to think that there's some sort of connecting force that binds us together, not only those currently walking on the planet, but those that have gone before. And you can see this recurring throughout different cultures all the way across the planet. So I mean, it's just fascinating, and I consider myself to be extremely fortunate because each week I have people call me and share their experiences with the strange and the paranormal. And I like to give them a voice. Sort of my journalism background kicks in because I tell people at the beginning of each episode, this is your story, it's your show. So I may ask some clarifying questions and I might offer a few other things to the side, but really I want to know what you saw. And that's how Shadows of Legend was born.
I love that title, Shadows of Legend. How did you come up with that? I mean, that's very unique. I
Well,
mean, you know how we come up with explaining the unexplainable, right? Mercedes looked at me and she said, I don't know how to explain who you are or what you are, so we'll just call the program Explaining the Unexplainable.
No, that's not right.
but but you see, that's perfect though, because it's a good title, looks good on a header, and it implies that there's going to be a lot of unexplained things that you're trying to grapple with. So I think that
Charles, that's not what happened. Okay, that is not
I'm
it.
busted. I'm
Yeah,
busted.
yes. He used to have a show called Explaining the Unexplainable on like in the 90s, I guess.
Yeah, on Pal
Right?
Talk.
Yeah, and so he talked about that a lot. And then like that, I just got that message like, let's just do that and see if he wanted to do that. But that's we're using his title of his past show and reviving it.
Yeah, so this kind of the reincarcerated, I mean, reincarnated version of these, and it's a better version too because I mean, we reach more people, we get to see
yeah,
each other, and Mercedes had a very successful show, um, and it was such an honor. She contacted me. Of course, she's the co-host on the Unseen Realm, where we
mhm,
broadcast every week on Saturday, dealing with spiritual matters and exorcism and all things that go bump in the night. Um, but she asked me, and it's such an honor. She asked me because she wanted to integrate the program that she was already doing into this program that we're doing tonight. And for her to
okay.
ask me to come on alongside of her was such an honor because it's opened up a lot of many different variables for us to be able to get out in front of a lot more people, to be able to invite more people to the table like yourself with the
Yeah.
expertise that you have to be able to reach out to our audience and to speak about things sometimes that people are afraid to talk about.
Yeah,
Well,
like
you
the
oh, I'm
cryptid.
sorry. Go ahead.
What's interesting, and when he told me your title, Shadows of Legend, well, the I just finished a documentary. It took
Mhm.
years to do it, but I mean, it's finished and it did get picked up for
Excellent.
distribution. But thank you. It's called Shadows of the Desert. So I was like, when he said shadows of, and so the funny thing is people don't understand, but it's pretty much we are in the desert, yes, but there is something more involved, like a kind of close to the actual street that we live on. So, but
Oh,
I thought that was so interesting that yours is Shadows of Legend of the. Now, why did you not use Shadows of Legends or Shadows of the Legends? You phrased it a certain way.
well, it really comes down to everything is a shadow of something else. It depends
Shadow
on
of Legend.
where our eyes are looking at any given moment, what we see, and what overshadows what we see. And plus, I just like the word shadows. It's
Yeah.
very evocative of so many.
Yes.
And
Yes.
legends, well, I mean, it's kind of like you tell somebody something, and then they tell someone, and they tell someone. So, and these things change over time. So, what is the original legend that casts the shadows that we're seeing now? So
Yeah.
the whole concept is fascinating. Plus, I'm a huge fan of Roger Zelazny, and wrote the Chronicles of Amber, and talking about walking through the shadows and everything. So yeah, that of course is a work of fiction, and supposedly the city of Amber is the only real thing in the universe, and everything else is a shadow of that. So thinking about that, I thought, that's a perfect way to describe things, because you have to walk into the shadows and you have to look around to find the kernel of truth that is behind all of these legends.
Yeah. And you know what else is about the shadows that I was getting? Because we live in the desert. And
Mhm.
so, like the shadow, we get the shadows from the clouds, and they actually
Yes.
bring coolness. I mean, and the animals will lay in that. Or when you have the saguaro or the lonesome cactus, it sheds this shadow that is actually a place where they can rejuvenate, or we can, and you know what I mean? So it's almost like the shadows, it's not so always so scary. It's actually just a, you have to uncover it, or it heals you too.
You know,
Well,
it's funny you bring that up, and I don't mean to jump in front of you, Brother
oh,
Charlie,
please go
but
ahead.
she brings up something about healing in the shadow. If you remember in the scriptures, the Apostle Peter, they would lay the sick in the streets so that Peter's shadow might fall on them. And when it did, they were healed of their sicknesses and their ailments. And that reminds me of the scripture of the book of Psalm. Psalm 91, verse 1 says, He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. So you're right, there is healing in the shadow.
Oh,
Well,
I
see,
love that. I never knew that. I didn't know that
there's
message in the
there's negative.
Bible.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
No, no, I'm dead.
Go ahead, Charlie. You got to just jump in there.
Yeah,
No,
we'll
that's
stop
okay.
talking.
It's totally acceptable to tell me to shut up long enough for you to
No,
say something.
no, no, no.
I have
Don't
no
shut
problem.
up.
Uh, but uh, a lot of it is the negative connotations of shadows. Not all shadows, as you say, are bad. It's really our perception. And that's why I mentioned before what makes a culture afraid. So, it may be in one culture it's totally acceptable and it's normal, and in another culture it's terrifying. It's all our perception. So, uh, there may be horrifying things in the dark,
Yeah.
but there might actually be peace and healing and rest. And
Well, Charles, how do you like to be called, Charlie or Charles?
I've been called so many things. You just pick one.
Okay. Oh, wait, Charles.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Tell me,
Sir, Sir
tell us
Charles.
how you, well, how did you meet our brother Joshua here?
Well, that's funny. 'Cause we were in lodge together. We were Masons, and we met several years ago, and become instantly best friends. And due to that, part fraternity, but also because we had so many similar things. This for one thing, and plus, honestly, I'll talk to anyone, and I'm pretty sure he will too. So it makes it easy to forge a friendship.
Yeah, we met a long time ago. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
it's
quite a
you
while.
know, you're talking about the shadow. There's something
Yeah.
that really come to mind. Mercedes knows I'm a student of psychology, and you do as well. But Carl Jung, or as some people call him, and I have to correct him, Carl Jung. Um, he
What's it like
defined
everywhere else but Eastern Kentucky? It's pronounced Versailles, but in Kentucky, it's Versailles. So
Versailles, yes, yes. So and Mercedes is going to come up here and go on a Bigfoot expedition with me one day, and we might have to get you to come with us, brother Charlie.
well,
Oh,
I've got 140 acres. You just come to my house.
Oh my goodness! Well, you heard that, Mercedes. 140 acres.
140
We,
acres.
we got to go. But
And most of it's hillside and trees. But
I like that. So and we'll get into that here in a minute. But
okay,
you know, the shadow is the unconscious part of the psyche that
yeah.
contains repressed weaknesses, desires, and
Mhm.
instincts, and it's not inherently evil. It's
No,
just the unknown side of ourselves, and a lot of us have never ever discovered that part of ourselves. And there can be positive aspects to the shadow, untapped creativity. I'm
yes.
still looking for that. The hidden strengths or emotions that have been culturally or personally suppressed. So there's a lot of mystery in the shadow.
Mhm. Well, uh, that's a lot of that is because there's a lot of mystery in our lives that we don't really realize. Too many people, and this isn't a value judgment at all. It seems to be a default setting. I think society does it to us. A lot of times we are just a placeholder in our own lives, so we forget to experience it. And you really need to get out and experience things. which is more, I guess, philosophical and psychological than paranormal.
Right.
But you really need to know who you are, and if you don't know, find it, create it, because it helps us to decide how the world around us operates.
Absolutely.
You know, my wife, for years, she's very practical. She's very pragmatic. I don't know why she married me, but uh, she's told me, if we're out at night and something howls, she thinks dog, I think werewolf. Okay, uh, but that's just for a split second, because I have that bent. I've been studying these things forever. I'll get more back to that in a minute. How the decades change things, but uh, really, it's how you interpret those things. She's grew up in the country just like I did, and she's out at night. Something hoots, something barks, something howls. It's no big deal. She knows what it is, and she just moves on. Sometimes, however, there are things that you can't really identify. So I walk out on my porch. I smoke. Not recommending it. It's just a fact. But uh, my wife's allergic, so I don't smoke in the house. So if I wake up at 2:30 in the morning, I walk outside and smoke a cigarette. And I live next to this field, and I tell this story to scare my city dwelling friends. Okay. So I walk out there and smoking a cigarette, and I hear something out in the field crashing through there. I think it's a deer, because I've impressed it. I've seen deer come out of there, but I can't see it and I can't smell it. So I don't know actually what is in the field. Now, from a paranormal standpoint, I'm not, by any stretch of imagination, what you would call a psychic or anything like that. But there's sometimes I go out and smoke a cigarette, and the cat and I both know that's not a deer in the field. So I just finish my cigarette and I walk back in the house. So, uh, because these things are there in and out of the shadows, weaving out. One of my first episodes, I tried to do I did actually a very poor imitation of my grandfather's voice. And he described seeing what he called a rabid dog. Said it scared, terrified him. He was a child when this happened. And so I'm thinking, yeah, that's pretty scary to run into a rabid dog. Well, fast forward. So now it would be 53 years later. I'm watching one of these paranormal shows, and this guy sees these creatures out in the woods that, for all intents and purposes, are werewolves. And the way he describes seeing these creatures is the exact same way my grandfather described seeing this rabid dog, talking about it moving uncomfortable in its own skin and things like that. So, uh, as the decades pass, you start with one set of information and a base of knowledge. And as time moves forward and more information is added to it from your own research and from the research of others, you start to think, maybe I should update my thoughts on this. Maybe actually what my grandfather saw 53, well, actually more than that, because he was a child when you're talking, oh Lord, I guess you combine it all together close to 100 years ago, uh, was actually what in modern parlance they would call a dog man. So, and then my favorite, and I've told this before to you Josh, always a fan of Irish mythology and folklore. And one of the myths was the coming of the Tuatha De Danann, the elves.
Hmm.
Uh, in Ireland, it was the whole island was run over by these bestial people. Then humans were basically fodder. Well, then the island was covered for 7 days in cloud and smoke. And at the morning of the seventh day, actually, the the sky broke open and the sun shined through, and these beautiful people on shining ships descended on the island and basically wiped out the Fomori. And it was the elves. And if it helps, you can think in terms of what would be a Tolkien elf, how Tolkien describes elves. But after all these years, I'm thinking, yeah, great myth, but it sounds suspiciously like an alien invasion. And I'm old, but I wasn't there at the time. So I don't really know, but it causes, it generates a lot of questions. So, uh, what are the shadows wrapped around that legend? What is keeping us from seeing the truth of what happened. So,
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
well,
When
I mean,
you,
it
I
is.
mean, that is wow. That is
Right.
that's a deep explanation of you know uh, how you come up with the name and your thought process of uh, I guess the way you view everything around you. I mean, you could use that philosophy to view any type of legend or any type of story that you hear. When you talked about the dog man or the werewolf,
Mhm.
and we'll maybe get into some of your all stories because Mercedes and I've talked about it before, and you and I've talked
Mhm.
about it because
Yes.
we've heard that the dog man um, is some kind of government experiment possibly on service members or maybe people that have been wounded or people that have died. Maybe it's bodies of service members that have been taken for such a lab experiment, and there's a book that a friend of mine wrote. It's called Mysterious Kentucky. It was written by Bart Nunley,
Okay.
and Bart Nunley has several of the stories that I've shared with him in that book. But one in particular, there's a road called 168, and I know you're familiar with it,
Yeah.
Charlie. My aunt, we lived in South Ashland, so it's kind of the connector to US 23, which
I won't
in,
go into what I was doing on 168 in the middle of the night on the weekend, but yes, I'm familiar with the road.
well, she was coming, probably what a lot of people your age back then was doing. Uh, but anyways, this is still kind of rural, but there's houses out there now. When I came along, they had already started building
Yes.
houses. This is, you know, so a lot of people have died on that road. There's a lot of mystery about that road as well. But she's driving, going. She was working. I don't remember where it says she was working. She was working
Is this
somewhere in
your
Huntington.
grandmother?
Knows my great aunt, my grandmother's sister.
Okay.
It's Corby's or Corbin's or some kind of clothing factory in Huntington or something. And she was driving along this road and she made that turn and there's a winding turn like an S turn on that road, and as you come out of that turn, she said standing on the side of the road was what looked to be a werewolf. And she said she'll never forget it as long as she lives, and she still talks about it this day with a fear about it,
Yeah.
because it scared her. I asked her, I said, would you slow down and open the window? No, I didn't slow down. I hit the gas and got out of there.
I mean, it's a terrifying story. Okay. But I was thinking about, ironically, I was thinking about this earlier. Um, would you call a lion evil simply because it will straight up eat you?
No, it's its
No.
nature.
Okay. So, and I've said this for decades. Okay. When we discuss werewolves, it's not the wolf part of that combination that makes something evil. It's the man part because it generates and it releases those primal urges that most most civilized people repress. And somebody, as a rule, somebody cuts you off in traffic, you may say a few choice words, but as a rule, you're not going to track them down and beat them with a baseball bat. But if something were to happen to release all those inhibitions, then some things come out that is actually evil. So that's the werewolf combo. All right. Now, if it's a dog man, then it's its own individual creature. And simply because it's looking for food, does that make it evil?
No. Do they
I
have
was
the intellect like we do, though? Go ahead, Mercedes.
I was thinking though that a lot of it with the werewolves now that they're not. I thought that that was pretty much kind of removed from the thought process that they would change from human to werewolf. I mean, like there's the Werewolf of Bray Road, which I love that on the that
Mhm.
and that was with Lee Hampel, and I interviewed him, and
Mhm.
not Tucson, Tucson, sorry, it's a ghost. I can't remember. Small Town Monsters. It's one of my favorite documentary series,
Yes.
right? But from what I'm seeing or what I'm hearing, it's like they really are just werewolves, or they're werewolves. So that wouldn't. Do you think they actually do change from human to werewolf, Charles?
Well, the thing of it is, people, and there's a movement,
It's my
uh,
werewolf.
we'll say 200 years ago, anything that happened wasn't normal, had a supernatural explanation. Okay. So, but the very werewolf legend, for instance, implies that someone's cursed or someone's working black magic or something along those lines. There's even one legend that believed if a child was born on Christmas Eve, that it was destined to become a werewolf. And that's tied into, though you're insulting Jesus by being born on his birthday and things of that nature. But
Mm.
this movement here, a good example is The Walking Dead. Okay, uh, they've
Yeah.
done everything in the world to explain why zombies are still coherent after having been dead for months, if not years. And to me, the scientific explanation doesn't hold water because it's a supernatural explanation that knits everything together. Because we all know if you don't have the proper amount of blood flow and things of that nature, you're going to have necrosis, and a body, if nothing else, would fall apart in the heat. Winter, not so bad. It's like putting a piece of meat in the freezer, but it can still even get freezer burnt. But summertime on dead flesh, no. I mean, about a week tops. Uh, but we've moved away from the supernatural explanation of it, and in some cases, it's not a bad thing because one explanation came from a fiction writer. It was actually made into a popular movie decades ago called The Wolfen. All right.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Writer Whitley Strieber, the way he described the werewolf legends was that there was an intelligent strain of humanoid wolves that developed alongside human beings, and they preyed on humans, and reprehensible human psychotic people and whatnot would run with them to eat the leavings, and people were seeing these shaggy unkempt humans and running with humanoid wolves. So that's how the legend of werewolves came about, and that,
Well,
to me, that sounds like a halfway plausible explanation.
wow. So you really do a lot of what you do. I think about is about legend and how it all began and why. I really love that kind of stuff.
We just, I
That's
mean,
amazing. What
everything's
about the cryptids? Is now so the cryptids? How do you feel about that?
well. I actually mentioned that years ago, before there was snail mail or any kind of mail, when people living in what's now North America, and they thought that their entire world was North America. You have the world and you got water. Uh, Before there was ever anything bigger than a canoe,
Right.
these people were talking about this large, hairy humanoid creature in the forest, and they referred to it by many names. The most popular name is Sasquatch. At the same time, half a world away in Nepal, for instance, same mechanics. That was their entire world. So they didn't know North America existed. Okay. They were talking about reporting a large, hairy humanoid creature, and they many names, but a common one is Yeti. So these creatures are so strikingly similar that these individuals, I believe, were seeing something. And you think about, we have a tendency to think about things in a humanocentric viewpoint. Okay. Uh, uh, that's a bad thing sometimes because if it's not in front of our nose, it doesn't exist. And I've heard these people explain, you try to explain their disbelief in things like Sasquatch. That, oh, well, we have so many drones and we would see this if we were out there, we'd find them. I mean, how? I mean, there's 700 million acres of undeveloped forest in North America alone,
Wow.
even with drones. And we all know how hard it is to fly a kite around trees or power lines. Imagine trying to fly a drone through trees. So that explanation that it doesn't hold water to me. I believe there is a creature out there. What it is, I don't know. I've never met him. Uh, I've talked to a lot of indigenous people that have explained Sasquatch and Bigfoot, and their legends state that he's kind of like the protector of the forest, and they consider him to be a pseudo mystical being, and their way to deal with it is to avoid him because you leave him alone, you don't bother him. He's out there in the woods doing his thing. Leave him alone. Uh, and they respect and revere it, and are sometimes terrified about it because uh, it's not always a pleasant thing to sight one of these creatures.
Right.
I don't know if that actually answered your question. I'm on my backup cup of coffee now. You know, ought to just skip to the beer hat, with the big things and the straw. Yeah.
Well, how does your view of other cryptids, though, like Mothman and the Jersey Devil, the Flatwoods Monster? We've got the Mothman and the Flatwoods Monster in West Virginia.
Yes.
So, um,
Well, I've interviewed a lot of people about Mothman, and I've even interviewed him for the newspaper. Uh, I believe something was there. I do not.
Oh, can you hear him?
That's it.
we lost audio for a second. Can you hear us, Charlie?
I can hear you. Can you
Okay,
hear me?
yeah, perfect. Yeah, I can hear you now.
That
Must
was strange.
Yeah, it
must
kind
have
of faded
been.
out a little bit, but
Yeah, because I started checking make sure my mic's still working.
Yeah, go ahead and say that. What were you saying?
Okay, I don't agree that people saw a sandhill crane. Okay, a crane's a big bird. It's like we see some eagles around here occasionally. And I was fortunate enough, I was in the car, so there was no danger uh, seeing this eagle. It was actually setting on the ground. And as I drove by in my truck, he lifts off from the ground, and this is a huge bird, but it's still not man size. A
Right.
6 foot wingspan, and like I said, it's a big bird.
Yeah.
But what they described seeing had to be around 8 foot tall, and its wingspan was probably 10 feet. So uh, I believe they saw something, and I think we're hamstringing ourselves here because all the people I've talked to, almost without exception, uh, it's well, I don't want you to think I'm crazy, and I didn't tell people things because I thought that didn't want people to think I'm crazy. Okay, that's detrimental to finding information. If someone tells me that they had lunch with Bigfoot and Mothman yesterday, I wasn't there. I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, tell me what it's like. What'd you have for dinner? Give me the information. And because if you don't normalize the conversation and let people give you as clear information as they can possibly give you, then you'll never really know if these things are myths or actually are creatures out in the wild.
Well, I
So
think it's
I hope
important.
that answered your question.
Well, I mean, I think it does because we have to be able to communicate. Most people are afraid to talk, and that's why it's really important. I think to have these type of shows or this kind of conversation while we can, still communicate with each other before that changes. But this is the weirdest. I was reading this. I thought zombies. Thank you, Lorraine. I thought
Yeah.
zombies were caused by poison made from the puffer fish, and they were not dead. Oh, I lost it. What was that question? But they were
Well,
not dead, but they're zombies.
ironically, kind of by default, the Catholic Church made zombies. Okay, not directly, not directly. Okay, so of course you have all the voodoo and everything else. All right, and uh, when they had people working in the cane fields and everything, they were terrified that their lives were miserable, that they would be brought back from the dead to continue working. And most of that kind of zombie, uh, you had your, I guess your bourgeois, they call them, that would literally poison people and it put them into a stupor. They could still follow basic directions and movements and things like that, but their brains really weren't there. It's kind of like a walking coma. Okay.
Right.
And I think that's what you're talking about. So, yes, you can poison someone and turn him into a, a type of zombie. But when I was referring to zombies, I'm talking about a corpse that is reanimated. So,
yeah, I mean, George Romero said it was some kind of a satellite that crashed into the Earth that caused the bodies of the dead to come back to life, and Night of the Living Dead, and then Return of the Living Dead. It was because of the little canister that fell off the back of that truck that was
yes.
hidden in the basement of Bert's, you know, um, medical warehouse.
Exactly.
And they hit it and it came out, that's what brought the dead back to life in search for brains. Now, I don't know how that would go over today because not many people use those anymore.
Well, but if they've not been used, they should still be fresh. You would think. So
Well, we do have a question from Lorraine, another
okay.
one. But it says, do you think that Mothman was a military experiment gone astray?
That's a possibility. But when you think about things, it's just like I love comic books. Spider-Man is one of my favorite comic book characters of all time. Bit by a radioactive spider, and suddenly this teenager becomes, buff and fights crime and everything. The reality of it is, if Peter Parker had actually been bitten by a radioactive spider, he would most likely die. Okay, because it's kind of like an evolution thing. It doesn't really change that fast. Mutations happen all the time in nature, but to, I guess, shepherd that mutation along in any sort of reasonable time frame, yeah, I think it would be prohibited. I don't think we have to technology. Not saying we'll never have it, but I don't think that technology exists today. More likely than not, if you want my opinion, I think often there's more than one of them. There has to be a breeding problem. But they got in there, stirring things up, and they basically habitat. So that's why we started seeing it.
I'm having trouble hearing him.
Yeah, you kind of it faded out again for some reason.
Okay, so are we doing okay now? I'm
You sound
sorry.
Yeah.
perfect now. I don't know.
Okay.
It's like it was a wave, like you
Huh.
still sounding great, and then it kind of like somebody pulled your voice back, and then it's like because he's got that powerful voice. It's funny that question about the military experiment gone array. There's still I don't know if you've heard of this or not, Charlie, but there's still people who claim that when they go up there around the old TNT factory and the old places where Mothman was spotted, that there's a gate that exists up there with
Mhm,
armed soldiers, armed with M16 rifles.
mhm,
I'm not sure how to, I've never really could explain what it is that they're guarding up there. That used to be my route. Actually, met myself and a friend of mine named Dave. We run the garbage route up there for a garbage company that we worked for years and years ago when we was
mhm,
driving truck together, and we've seen a lot of pretty interesting stuff out there in that part of the country. And as well as I do, that's God's country out there. That place
oh,
is
absolutely.
still
Yeah.
untouched. And why was the Mothman hanging out around those TNT areas? I mean, what was the you know I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions that have been asked that have never really been answered, and um, there's a lot of
Humans
different.
humans come into an area like you're talking about being untouched, God's country. Okay. Uh, People, we come in, we bring in earth movers, we change things, we alter the pathway of rivers and things like that. From a just a basic, we'll say, scientific outlook, if a creature was inhabiting that area and you went in and destroyed their habitat, of course they would either go away or become more active. Uh, I had interviewed a gentleman here who was a demolition person for the in the service, and they were blowing up a couple of sites, and he actually saw uh, I think it was two Bigfoot he saw at the time after one of these explosions had went off, because these Bigfoot, I keep on saying big feet, that's my whatever. It's my English editing in my head, but uh, they had come out to check and see what was going on. Now, from a supernatural standpoint, and a lot of people think that these creatures are at least borderline supernatural.
Mhm.
You disturb a resting place, you alter the energy of an area. It's kind of like uh, a Ouija board. You're opening a door and you don't know what's going to come out. So, but we just bull through and do what we do, and it's like, oh my, how did that happen? Well, I mean, you caused that. That's how it happened, and now you've got to deal with the effects of it.
Tell us
Yeah,
about the new
absolutely.
book you're writing.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to work on a series, and it's based loosely on my podcast because what I want to do, I want to come bring all this information together, and I want to explain how people view things like the supernatural. And the first one's going to be about ghosts and spirits, and people have a lot of different ideas on how these things work. Uh, now, Josh, you and I have talked about this at length. I believe I'm a Christian. I'm not going to, you know, inhibit anyone else's religious beliefs, but I believe in those. I guess dogma, not in a bad way. They're just a series of beliefs. But a lot of other people believe. Well, I mean, like the Japanese have had what we call ancestor worship for centuries. They believe that. The spirits of your departed loved ones are close to you always and endeavoring to help you out. Whereas from a Christian faith, we have a tendency to think that, okay, we die and it's a paradise or, of course, the other place, which is much more negative. Uh, but I want to gather together these stories and explain how everyone views the paranormal. I've, well, my grandfather was a phenomenal storyteller. And as long as I knew him, he was also. We didn't really have deacons in the church, but you could say he was like a deacon or a sexton of the church because he took care of the place and watched everything. But uh, as the saying goes, he was a dragon in his day, because when he was a younger man, he tore stuff up. So, and and he
One of those
gathered
earth movers, huh?
absolutely yes, and never met a drink he didn't like, but.
He was Irish, right?
Exactly, yeah. But now, by the time I come along, well, it's his grandpa. He drank coffee and chewed tobacco and everything else, but there was no heavy drinking or anything. But he had all these phenomenal stories, and a lot of those were tied around ghosts. And it's even though he was a Christian, he believed in ghosts. Now, honestly, it's always blown my mind how Christians cannot believe in ghosts because you're literally working for the ghost. And so it's just okay, yeah. But I think the best way to describe it is Christians believe there's more regulation on how those things play out, whereas other cultures have uh, a lot of different beliefs on how these things happen. And what I wanted to do is again, like I said, normalize the conversation, throw out what people think, and discuss these things. Uh, for decades, I've talked about ghosts, and I have several theories on that. And you'll appreciate this one, Josh. And I'm pretty sure we've discussed this before. Uh, Not every time you're seeing a ghost are you seeing your dearly departed great aunt Ethel. Because one of my theories to explain ghostly activity is the angel and devil explanation. If an angel wants to persuade you to do something, they're going to appear in a fair form and say, "Oh, your great aunt Ethel. Oh, honey, now you need to do this. This is going to be better for you." And if a devil wants to deceive you and talk you into doing something, they're going to appear in a fair form as well. In the Middle Ages, people believed the devil was hiding behind every bush to jump out and bite your head off. Uh, that's just not logistically possible, and that's not the way these negative spirits work. I had a wonderful interview with a wonderful lady named Sandrea Mosses, and she's been on a lot of the paranormal TV shows and everything. And she, part of this interview, she was telling about a person she knew, a friend of hers, had her angel, and I'm doing the air quotes there because this spirit started talking to her, and it started out fair and friendly, but this spirit through persuasion wrecked her life. It
Mm.
persuaded her to basically she wasn't actually rich, but it devastated her financially, devastated her emotionally, and in the end, it was determined that actually this was not an angel at all. This was
Right,
in fact a demon.
right. Mm-hmm.
So I want to touch on all those things, and so improves the knowledge base maybe.
That's so important because
It is.
we talk about this on the unseen realm. Well, they talk about it. We just kind of ask questions, but
Uh,
and that happened with me. Like I thought something was just a nice energy. I'd always felt like it was like coming at the right before I went to sleep. Like it was almost like light with, like sparkly. And I thought it was a healing energy. I thought
mhm,
it was, and come to find out that no, that was not, it was not. And so that, a lot of that was like so much trickery that I was so in that little world of thinking that there really was nothing that was trick whatever I could see through it or something. But yeah, so I think what you're going to write in that book is very important because people they do believe that everybody is their grand. I mean, I've seen Joe's dad here
mhm,
on when I first moved in. Like he was in a photograph. I took a picture of our cat. Like I was doing a selfie with my cat, and then later, as I looked at it, here's his dad's face
mhm,
right here. I still have it, and I was like, and I didn't know it was him because didn't really notice that there was this picture right where this desk is at. That his
mhm,
dad was in the picture, like hanging with three guys in the army,
mhm,
and I showed him that picture just to show him of the cat and me. He goes, "Look at that." And I showed him the face, but he goes, "That's my dad." And so I went in there and I looked at the picture, and I had been looking at that picture earlier that day, but I didn't recognize that that was the picture of his dad. So I do believe that that was his dad welcoming me into the house.
mhm. And that's possible because I mentioned earlier, like from a Christian standpoint, we think there's more structure, but uh, Christians don't understand the concept of time. Uh, the Bible, God has no time. Time is just something. Do you think the
Right.
sun? Do you think the sun really cares when you set your watch? Okay, so it's a human convention. So it is possible that spirits walk the earth, and I'm not necessarily saying in torment. It's possible that spirits walk the earth, and I'll tell you a funny story. It's kind of creepy too. Uh, years
That's
ago,
what we like.
well, yes, that's it. Years ago, uh, I was working for this one newspaper, and I interviewed a group of people called the Greenup County Paranormal Society. Okay,
Hmm.
and first time I'd met them. So, and they were very respectful, but nice people, really are. And so, whenever they referred to me, it was Mr. Romans. No one called me by my first name, and which I wouldn't have minded, but they just didn't because they're very respectful and everything. So, and I record these interviews because I don't write that fast, and I never learned shorthand. And I'll record these interviews. I come home, put them on my computer, and I play them and write the story. And you never write the story the way the interview is recorded. But I'm listening to this, and right after I'd said something exceptionally silly, because we were laughing and carrying on, I heard something like, "No, no, that's not true." So I back it up and I play it again. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like it. So I backed it up the third time, and then I yelled at my wife. I said, "Hey, come here a minute." She said, "I'm busy. What do you want?" I said, "Come in here. I need you to listen to this." So she walks in the office, and I said, "Sit down, put the headphones on, hit play." So she sits down and she hits play, and her jaw dropped, and her eyes got real big. She looked at me and she said, "That's your mother's voice." And my mother had been dead
Wow.
for a year. Now, right after I'd said something, kind of silly, this voice says, "Charlie," just like my mother did to correct me for being an idiot, and embarrassing her. And now I'm 100% certain that that was my mother's voice. Not necessarily certain it was her using it. So I am terminally suspicious. And I can acknowledge that something happened, but I need a little bit more information to determine what happened. So uh, if a voice starts speaking to me out of an empty room, I will talk to it. But if you tell me that you're my dearly departed great Aunt Ethel, my first thought is going to be, okay, prove it. what did you fix me when I came over to visit? You know, what did we drink? What games did we play when I was there? I need more information.
Mm,
And that's kind of biblical too, because Josh, you bear me out on this. In the Bible it says, "Try the spirits and know they be true."
right.
It does. It kind of takes me back to an experience I had in Moorhead, Kentucky. I was working at the time,
Oh yeah, all the
and
more hits on it.
yeah, it is. You're right. Well, I was haunting Moorhead at this particular time, and,
Okay.
and this spirit came to me, and the spirit presented itself as my grandmother. And my grandmother had been dead. She died in 2022. This is around 2023, and she'd been dead for probably about a year.
Okay.
And this spirit kept hovering around me as I'm outside working, and the spirit kept speaking to me real quickly, real fast. Let me go, 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 right in my face, almost like it was my grandmother trying to get me to release her, to say that she could go, on to heaven or wherever it was that she wanted to go. And I felt troubled because I knew this wasn't my grandma, but it
Right.
looked like
Oh,
her, it sounded like her. And of course, when I felt that way, I felt it was malevolent, I rebuked it in the name of
Yeah.
Jesus Christ and commanded it to go. And it did, because I knew it wasn't my grandmother. I knew my grandmother was in heaven. So spirits can mimic people.
Oh yes.
Um, but there are times though, like with King Saul, when King Saul had went to the witch of Endor, that she did summon the spirit of Samuel the prophet. He literally did come from the dead and speak to the king of Israel and
Yes.
told him the doom that was coming upon his kingdom. But you're right. You bring up a very interesting thing. Voices that we hear, images that we see. Just like my cousin passed away. He died when he was 14. He was lifting weights and it caused him to have a brain aneurysm. He died. Well,
Mhm.
his cousins, our other cousins, had seen him walking up and down the street, and they would walk with him. And then after that, they were all sitting in the living room. This is my dad. My dad's been involved in deliverance ministry and paranormal stuff
Mhm.
since the 70s.
Yeah.
So I
oh,
kind of, that's and I've never really talked much about that, Mercedes.
I
We'll get
didn't
into
know
that one of these
that.
days. Yeah. Um, but my dad was in big time, really heavily involved in deliverance ministry, casting out devils and stuff too. So
Oh,
and we'll, like I said, we'll talk more about that sometime. But there was a spirit that was attached to this experience they were having, and it would walk up and stick its head through the door, and its hair would come down in front of its face, and it would make all these noises and sounds that terrorized the family. Well, my dad and his partner James, who was kind of like a prophet, like a modern day prophet. I mean, James could foretell things that was going to happen and could even hear your thoughts. He was kind of a real supernatural, spiritually in tune guy. And they went down there and prayed, and so those spirits never came back. But she said the thing that was ironic is she could hear Danny Joe walking down the road whistling like he always did as a kid, and
Mhm.
that was the key for her to come out and have interactions with the spirit. On the backside of the Ashland Cemetery is where they lived. And there's a lot of strange things that go on in the Ashland Cemetery that we could go for another
There definitely.
hour.
Yeah.
Like you've heard of the werewolf of the Ashland Cemetery, the guy that used to lock even the police inside the cemetery and chase them around in their cruiser.
Ironically, you
what?
mentioned that. When I worked for the Daily Independent, I bought a werewolf costume. So we did
Was
a
that
kind of
you?
parody.
Was
That was me. Yeah, I'm the werewolf. And it's funny because we were filming this, and we're filming part of this in Ohio. So we're up on this hillside, and I was like, okay, we'll stand in the ditch there, and like you're terrorizing them as they come up there. So I'm standing in the ditch line, and there's traffic. So people would come around the curve, and I'd go like this and wave. And one of the one of the girls there was like, "Why are you waving at people?" I said, "You're coming across a country road, and even though I don't actually look like a real creature, you see a werewolf standing in a ditch line. I don't want people to wreck, but if I wave and get their attention, maybe that will blunt a little bit of that fear."
Right, or keep somebody from shooting, because people around here tend to shoot out the windows at deer and everything.
Yes, they do, and that's another thing. I didn't want to get shot. Now, fast forward several years later, I was going to Lexington. Actually, it was in Lexington. It was Scarefest, and I David Naughton was going to be there, and they
Oh,
American Werewolf in London.
yeah.
My wife and I were talking. I can't remember if it was my idea or hers. Probably hers because she has the best ideas. And said thought it'd be cool to put on this werewolf costume and go give David Naughton a Dr. Pepper because his first thing was, he was the Dr. Pepper guy. I'm
Oh,
a
okay. Yeah,
pepper.
that's the purple guy.
Right. So, and he was a really good sport about that. He
Yeah.
was funny. I've got pictures of him. It was great, but but
Awesome.
no actual paranormal activity happened at that time. Just a lot of fun. And
Well, I mean, there was an actual story from the Ashland Cemetery that this guy
yes,
could jump the fences and flip over the gates, and
uh-huh,
he locked. I'm sure you've heard the legend. My uncle actually knew the gentleman that dressed up like the werewolf. He was in the circus
yes.
many years ago, and he could run on all fours like an actual animal
Oh, that'd
very
be amazing.
quickly. Of course, he's an old man. He may be dead now, but he was. It was very powerful at the time. I remember the cops, the Ashland police, getting locked in the cemetery, and they were screaming on the radio, "Come and get us out of here! He's going to kill us!" You know.
Oh my God.
That would be. I'm telling you, if I have a gun, I'm not going to scream for anybody to come help me. But ironically, though, the gun probably wouldn't help you a whole lot with a werewolf.
Probably, unless you had silver,
Well,
right?
No, you need silver.
one of the old legends that's kind of fallen out of favor because nobody really mentions this anymore. A bullet blessed by a priest, just a regular lead bullet, if it's blessed by a priest, will kill a werewolf.
Wow.
A
It'll
very,
work too.
a very old legend, yes.
Wow.
So, and you get into all the old legends, and I love these things because this is why libraries are so important. Uh, there was a gentleman named Doug Rigsby, and I always told Doug, if I get anywhere, it's your fault. He was a psychology professor, but
I
he drove.
loved him.
Oh, he's a great guy, and he drove the bookmobile. So he'd come out, and I grew up in this little community called Rush, okay, which is ironic because no one there ever got in a hurry. But
They still don't.
no, he'd pull
Well,
over.
actually, the off-road thing. So
Well, yeah, that's a bit different, yeah. But he'd come out in the bookmobile, and once he realized that I was actually reading the books I was checking out, he'd let me check out. I'd check out a dozen books or 2 dozen books, and so I devoured all these old legends. And there's something about seeing it in print on a piece of paper that somehow it makes it real. I mean, you can imagine unrolling an ancient scroll and uh, discovering lost or and perhaps forbidden knowledge. But yeah, you gather up all these legends, and it's interesting to compare that to the modern take on it. Uh, to start with, we were afraid of Frankenstein, and Frankenstein's been replaced by AI, and uh, people were afraid of vampires because, something come back from the dead and prey on the living, and like werewolves, for instance. In England, you're talking about when little villages, there may be 2 dozen people in the entire village, and these brutal winters where all the game would die out or move, and these predators were forced to prey on humans when honestly humans are actually pretty easy prey because compared to the garden variety field mouse, we're all blind, deaf, and stupid. but but we can make tools. We can make something to hurt you because if we punch you, you're just going to laugh. Nobody smacks a lion in the face. Mike Tyson's a devastating boxer, but Mike Tyson boxing a lion, my money's on the lion.
absolutely, all day long.
Yeah. However, things like spears and arrows and guns and dynamite, it gives us a little bit of edge. But watching these evolving fears over the years have, it's its own unique kind of education. And ironically, stepping away from the fear factor of the supernatural, I've interviewed a lot of people. They've had supernatural encounters or encounters with cryptids and things of that nature that weren't even slightly afraid. I interviewed one lady who described her encounters as a God wink. Her husband unfortunately passed away, and which left her to raise her daughter on her own. Her husband in life was a police officer, so there was numerous times in her life later where she had really terrible uh, circumstances, and something would always happen to help her through these circumstances, and there would always be some sort of visible sign of a variation of her husband's badge number.
Wow.
So she believed that her husband was there, and I'm not going to say he wasn't. Uh, Speaking of old legends, kind of reminds me of this. Uh, Guys returning from the war. I mean, we're talking about the war like 1,000 years ago, and he gets into a battle with a creature that we would think of as a vampire. Well, he manages to kill it or fight it until the sun comes up. Well, then he goes on home and meets a girl, marries her, starts to raise a family, and turns over a hay truck on himself and kills himself. So the neighbors start noticing that her fields are still getting plowed. Everything's still getting done around this farm. And according to legend, what had happened, her husband had returned as a vampire. But all he did was come back and work the farm at night so her and his daughter wouldn't starve to death.
Mm.
Wow.
So, and
Not all vampires are bad, right? I mean, I remember as a 12-year-old kid meeting Jonathan Frid at
oh Lord,
um,
yes.
up at Keith Albee Theater in Huntington, West Virginia. Jonathan Frid played Barnabas Collins on Dark Shadows
Oh
in the
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
60s, and I was the only kid there, and,
Wonderful
and
film.
I loved it. And then I was the only kid there among a bunch of college kids, and he pulled me in front of everybody, spent 45 minutes with me, signed all my books,
Oh
let us
my.
take pictures. My mother was terrified of him, wouldn't even get near him, you know. So
I remember that show.
I got to meet Jonathan. I have to share the
There
picture.
there's another show that's quite a bit newer than that, but still an old show called Forever Night. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
The pilot was like a movie of the week thing back when they did those, and the main character was played by Rick Springfield. Okay, in the pilot.
You mean like Jesse's Grill, Rick
Yeah,
Springfield?
yeah, that Rick Springfield.
Yeah, Rick Springfield. He's still alive.
And I'm probably going to mangle his name, but in the television series, it was Gerard Went Davies, I believe is how you pronounce his name. But of course, the vampire had been alive for 400 years, and he repented, so he was trying to go off the sauce, as it were, and he was playing a detective, and this was in Canada, this was going on, and he worked night shift, so. Uh, and he would just try to do good things. But uh, yeah, I saw the comment. Yeah, I tell you what, if I needed werewolf bullets blessed, I'm going to call Brother Josh and say, "Hey, can you do something about this magazine?"
Hey, Lorraine, we may have found us a new niche, a new business,
Yeah.
offering bullet blessings.
I have a book of short stories called Shadows. Ironically, I love the theme of shadows. And in one of the stories, this guy has a nail gun that's got silver nails, and he does a lot of weird stuff with it. But creative ways to banish demons and kill the bad guys.
That's
You know,
awesome.
the Lone Ranger had silver bullets
Well,
too.
that's true, yes, but
Yeah.
yeah, uh,
He
remember that?
also, he also had Tonto.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, which I probably pulled him out of a lot of fires. But
I love the Lone
I
Ranger.
think that's why Mercedes invited me to be part of the show. I'm like Tonto, you know.
Yeah. I have the Lone Ranger series, so I do like my Tonto and my Lone Ranger.
I do
well,
love the Lone Ranger too.
a lot of times, I don't wear a mask, but I think I am the lone idiot out here just doing stuff. It's okay. I'm having a good time. I mean, that's
You're very intelligent. You know what? It's hard to believe this hour has already went by that fast.
I
I mean,
know.
yeah,
we have to get
time.
Charlie back on. Will you come back on with us, Charlie?
Absolutely, and you guys need to reciprocate and be on Shadows of Legend. I'd like to hear a lot of your encounters, and I promise I will let you talk more if you come on my show.
We love to hear, people that have very interesting, not just backgrounds, but experiences. And I love what you do, being able to open, you know, to a variety of different people a platform to be able to share, and what's awesome about what we're doing here, like with the Web Radio Network and with social
Mhm.
media, is to be able to come together as a community of people and share our story. Everybody's story is important, and everybody's voice needs to be heard. And I think that that's
I agree.
that's kind of the foundation for why we're doing what we're doing here, and I think it's why you're doing what you're doing as well.
It is because you need to gather the information. Uh, at Crypticon, I ran into Giorgio Tsoukalos, the aliens guy. Yeah,
Hmm.
very intelligent man. We had a really good discussion, and I was telling us, we need to normalize the discussion about these things. When you open your mouth and say, "Hey, I saw something strange in the sky," it can't. The first reaction can't be, "Oh, you're a lunatic," or if you were to tell somebody, I believe my house is haunted, then the first reaction can't be, okay, what did you smoke last night before you heard these things? Uh, because honestly, the truth of the matter is, my first rule is I don't judge. I wasn't there. This isn't a field where you can lock things down. I tell people all the time the only absolute thing in the universe is basic mathematics. Two equal parts plus two equal parts will always be four equal parts. But you can't measure the supernatural and paranormal activity like you would a math problem. So,
It's
what do
true.
we have? We have the eyewitness account. And you have to make it easy for people to report these accounts so that together we can all figure out what's going on. At least that's my 2 cents. That's what I think.
Well, that was perfect.
Well, thank you. I
That's a
appreciate
perfect. That's a perfect way to bring this program to a close tonight. I hate to do this, but we're out of time, and it's been wonderful to have you on here with us tonight.
Well, I've
What an
really enjoyed
honor!
myself.
I mean,
How
what an
can
honor!
well what can you give us your how people can find you?
Okay. Well, of course, shadowsoflegend.com. Uh, Make sure that if you're Googling this or anything, type in Shadows of Legend, the podcast, because I'm not affiliated with them. For some reason, it takes you to Shadow Legends, the video game, which is it's an awesome video game, but it's not me. Okay. So available on everywhere you get your podcasts. You can email me if you are interested in sharing your information, Charlie at charlieromans.com. And that's also listed on the website. Uh, and if you go to the website, then you can listen to all the episodes back from the first one. And
Wow.
there's 3 seasons. And, listen to them all. Let me know what you think. I
That
will
sounds
respond to
awesome.
emails.
That's private chat that I put that on, wasn't it?
I don't know. I'm
I put
trying
his
to.
information on there, but I think it says private chat.
Oh
I'm sorry.
yeah. You know what? You can add that's thank you for doing that. I'm just doing some stuff too, but we can add that and tag that onto it after
Uh-huh.
Bishop Joshua. We could put that on because people will watch it afterwards. I notice people will tend to come and listen to it, if just not exactly always on our show here, but hopefully we'll be building, the audience even more now.
Well,
Um,
sometimes the logistics of
so
it, it's like streaming services have been a friend to me because it's just like before streaming services, the last time I actually watched a Major League Baseball game when it was on TV, Johnny Bench was the catcher for the Cincinnati Reds because
Wow.
my schedule has always been screwed up. I want to watch something and, oh, well, I missed it. Or I'm 3 hours too early and I ain't going to have time to stop. So it's wonderful when you can go back and pick and choose these episodes and listen to
yeah,
them at time. So,
yeah.
Absolutely.
I am always watching things so not maybe not always on the right, moment, but I've been trying to catch Brent Thomas. He seems to come on right about the time where I am just at that point where I could just sit for a minute, and I'm like, there's Brent. And so it's been super fun to, we had Brent Thomas on our show. I think it was a couple of weeks ago.
2 weeks ago,
He was
yes.
really awesome. Well, thank you so much for being
You're
here. And we barely, I mean, like this was, I don't know, we barely tipped the iceberg on.
Yeah, we didn't even touch the surface. We didn't scratch the surface. Charlie's got so much more to share, and we're going to have to, when we bring you back, we're going to have to talk about Ashland Cemetery.
Yes, we need to do that. And Rush Hill.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's a great place. Yeah, and
These sound like good things to actually make a little mini documentary on. They sound so scary.
They are, and it's right here in our general area. We live, close together, so.
Good rule
Well,
of thumb.
when I come out there, I'm going to bring my camera and we're going to film some whatever this stuff is out there.
Well, I was going to say, a good
Sounds
rule
good.
of thumb: if you're walking and you have to walk home, stop looking at your friend's sister and playing basketball. Leave before it gets dark.
That's right.
Get home. Don't want to be out in the dark. That's a good thing to
But
say.
I lived, I survived to tell the tale.
Right.
Well, we need to get him on. We need to put him on
Yeah.
the list, have him come back on, because this was
Really,
really.
I really enjoyed myself. You guys are fantastic to talk to.
Good.
You are
This
too.
is fun. We're going to have to extend the time, but we better get going and say goodnight. Would you lead
Right.
us in a prayer? Who wants to lead the prayer tonight for the ending?
Well, I think Josh would be the obvious choice.
Okay.
We can do that. Well, let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you, God, for another opportunity to come to you, asking, God, that you keep your hand upon everybody that's watching the show tonight. Keep them, God, then protect them. Keep your hand upon Brother Charlie and his wife and his children, his family, God, and for Mercedes and Joe and their family, their children, grandchildren, and all that's watching, God, around the world, all across this nation, and all 24 time zones. God, let there be peace in the world. We know that true peace comes from you, the Prince of Peace, and we know that one day when you're seated at the conference table, there will be true peace, peace that flows like a river, where men will love each other and not kill each other or hate each other. There'll be no more violence in that city, no more death, no more goodbyes, and I'm looking forward to that. So, Father, bless your people. Let your Spirit be with us in everything we do, and we'll never cease to give you the glory, honor, and praise. For it's in the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
We thank this wonderful audience that we have, or Lorraine for being on the chat tonight, and whoever else might have been on. And we ask that, you just continue to keep coming back and watching us and support this channel, support the Web Radio Network. There's so many great shows on the Web Radio Network. And we are always looking for sponsors on this show. Well, we've started, so now we're looking for sponsors. Sorry. Well, we're always. But yeah, so we're looking for sponsors. If you want to have a little commercial on here, let's do it. We can do that.
Yes.
And
Awesome.
you know who we have next week? We have our co-producer at the Unseen Realm, Desiree Valdez, has definitely confirmed she will be here next Saturday. No, sorry, next Tuesday, to talk about some amazing and very explaining the unexplainable things.
I look forward to that. It's going to be a great show.
Yeah, well,
Oh, somebody keeps
That-
going.
That was a ghost. That was a ghost. We call that ghost Ronnie.
Well, thank you so much, Charles, and thank you so much for being here. And good night, you wonderful people in the
Good night.
squares.
We love you all. Charlie, we love you, my friend.